Dear viewers, before we dive into tonight's story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear will grip your heart and twist your mind. Imagine suspecting betrayal in your own home, feeling that uneasy tightening in your chest whenever your spouse looks distant or makes excuses that don't quite fit. That was my reality one restless evening. What started as a whisper of doubt grew into an unbearable need to know the truth. I had no idea the events that night would unravel everything I believed about trust, loyalty, and love. Every shadow, every sound, every step I took would reveal a world hidden behind my husband's calm facade, a world I never imagined existed, and a revelation so dark and powerful it would change my life forever. It began subtly, with small, almost imperceptible signs. My husband's phone buzzed more frequently. His responses were curt, and a certain tension in his shoulders betrayed a secret he was desperate to guard. That evening, he left the house, claiming an errand, but the look in his eyes hinted at more than a simple chore. Curiosity, fear, and a stubborn need for truth collided inside me. I grabbed my coat, slipped into the shadows of the night, and followed him quietly. Every step measured, every breath shallow, my heart hammering in anticipation. I needed to stay unseen, invisible, yet alert to every motion, every interaction. The night was silent, except for the distant hum of traffic, the occasional bark of a dog, and the whisper of leaves, each sound amplified by my racing mind. Each one a countdown to a revelation I wasn't ready to face. The streets stretched ahead, dimly lit by flickering streetlights that threw elongated shadows across the pavement, turning every ordinary shape into a potential threat. I kept a careful distance, my eyes glued to his figure, trying to read every small gesture, every glance, every hesitation. My pulse throbbed violently as I followed him through twisting streets, past quiet shops shuttered for the night, and toward a hotel I had never thought he would enter. Each step he took seemed deliberate, purposeful, yet cloaked in secrecy. My imagination raced. Was there a hidden lover? Was he involved in something I couldn't yet comprehend? I pressed myself against the walls, holding my breath as he moved inside. Little did I know, I was moments away from discovering a truth far darker and more shocking than any betrayal I had feared. I watched from the shadows as he disappeared into the hotel lobby, the flickering lights casting strange patterns across the polished floors. My heart raced so violently it felt like it might betray me. Yet I couldn't move, couldn't call out. Something about the way he paused, glanced around, and then confidently strode forward made my stomach twist. I knew he expected privacy, secrecy, but the truth was, I had never expected to see this part of his life. Every instinct screamed for me to retreat, to leave this unknown world alone. But a stronger, fiercer need to know what he was hiding kept me rooted in place. The lobby seemed almost surreal, the distant murmur of guests, the echo of footsteps, and the scent of expensive cologne mingling with fear. I was stepping closer to a reality that could shatter everything I believed about him. He moved with purpose toward the elevators, checking his watch, his eyes scanning as if he were expecting someone. I pressed myself against the wall near the stairs, careful not to make a sound, trying to remain invisible invisible. My mind raced with scenarios. Was he meeting another woman? Or was this something far stranger? The corridor ahead was silent, almost unnaturally so, amplifying the sound of my own breathing. I adjusted my grip on the railing, feeling the cold metal bite into my palms. Every instinct in me screamed danger, but my curiosity, that insistent, unrelenting curiosity, pushed me forward. One wrong move, one faint sound, and he would know I was there. One misstep, and I could destroy my life or uncover the truth that would haunt me forever. As he stepped into the elevator and the doors slid shut, I felt a pang of relief. Yet that relief was short-lived. My eyes caught movement across the hallway, a hotel security camera, a reflective surface, a brief flash of his figure in the polished panels. My stomach twisted in anticipation and dread. I knew the floor he was heading to, the one room he had entered countless times, and a sinking realization hit me. He could turn, catch me at any second. My breath caught as I considered the consequences. Would he be angry, furious, or worse, silent and calculating? But it was too late to turn back. I needed answers, even if those answers were more terrifying than anything I had ever imagined. My life was about to change in a single, irreversibly shocking moment. I moved cautiously down the dimly lit hallway, every step calculated, every heartbeat loud in my ears. The carpet muffled my footsteps, yet the fear of making the slightest noise made my palms sweat. The elevator doors had closed, and I knew he was on another floor, unaware of my presence, or so I thought. My mind raced, imagining the worst. Had he discovered someone in the room, a stranger, a danger? I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, and forced myself to focus. I couldn't stop now. I had to know. The faint hum of the air conditioning, the distant chatter of a bellhop, the echo of a suitcase rolling somewhere far away, all became part of a tense, suffocating symphony. Every instinct told me to retreat, but every shred of courage, fueled by suspicion and dread, kept me moving forward. I reached the stairwell leading up to his floor, my legs trembling with tension and anticipation. Peering through the slightly cracked door, I saw the hotel corridor bathed in pale light, a contrast to the shadows I had clung to. I caught glimpses of his polished shoes moving with precision, every step purposeful, deliberate. I thought of how long I had trusted him, how carefully I had believed in the life we built together. And suddenly, everything seemed fragile. My stomach twisted as I realized that one wrong step, one rustle of clothing, one faint gasp, could reveal me instantly. The fear was paralyzing, but so was curiosity. I needed to see, to understand, to uncover the truth before it slipped away again. And in that moment, I knew the confrontation I had been avoiding was imminent, closer than I ever dared imagine. As I crept closer to the hotel room door, the faint smell of expensive perfume and cologne mingled in the air, twisting my senses. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear muffled voices, the low hum of conversation that sent chills down my spine. My pulse raced uncontrollably. I froze at every footstep, every echo in the hallway. And then, suddenly, the door opened wider and he turned. His eyes met mine, sharp, piercing, and in that single glance, I saw not anger or shock, but a mixture of betrayal, calculation, and warning. My body stiffened, every instinct screaming danger, yet I couldn't move. The hallway seemed to shrink around me, the lights too bright, my breath too loud. I had been caught, exposed in the very moment I sought the truth, and the weight of what was coming hit me like a physical blow. He didn't yell. He didn't move immediately, just stared, his gaze cold and unwavering, as if he had been expecting me all along. My knees threatened to buckle, my hands shook uncontrollably, and every instinct screamed to turn and run. But something deeper, something stubborn and furious, kept me rooted in place. Hotel corridors seemed to vanish around us. The soft carpet, the distant hum of elevators, the muted conversations, all faded into silence as his eyes bore into mine. The truth hovered, thick and suffocating, like a storm about to break. I could feel the tension between us, a taut thread that could snap at any second. Every plan I had made to quietly uncover his secret dissolved in that moment, and as he took a deliberate step closer, his voice finally cutting through the silence, low but commanding, I realized that this confrontation would not just reveal a secret. It would redefine everything I thought I knew about him, about us, and about the life I had believed in. My heart hammered so violently, I feared it might give away my presence before he spoke. "Why are you here?" he asked, calm, but with an edge that sent shivers down my spine. I swallowed hard, struggling to form words, to maintain control, while my mind raced through months of suspicion, lies, and small inconsistencies I had ignored. I realized with a sinking horror that this wasn't a simple affair. There was a reason, a motive, a purpose behind every clandestine meeting I had guessed at, but never dared confirm. The hotel corridor felt suffocating, the light glaring down on us like an interrogation lamp. I forced myself to take a shaky step forward, desperate for an explanation, yet terrified of what I might hear. My thoughts collided. Had I imagined all of this? Or was the truth far darker than anything my imagination could conjure? And as he studied my face, a faint, unreadable expression flickered across his features, hinting that whatever came next would be worse than betrayal. Before I could speak, he sighed and leaned against the doorframe, eyes scanning the hallway as if assessing the risk of being overheard. My stomach twisted, a cold dread settling over me, and I noticed the faint shimmer of a keycard in his hand, a symbol that this meeting was more official, more orchestrated than I had ever imagined. "You shouldn't have followed me," he said softly, but each word carried a weight that felt like a verdict. My mind screamed with questions. Who was he meeting? Why here? Why now? And why had he drawn me into this web of secrecy? Tension stretched unbearably, the seconds feeling like hours, each one thick with danger and revelation. And then, with a deliberate motion, he opened the hotel door wider, revealing a figure I did not expect, a shadow of my past colliding with the present. And I realized that the secret I had chased with relentless curiosity was far more sinister and far more personal than I could have ever anticipated. As the hotel door creaked wider, my eyes widened in disbelief. Standing, there wasn't a stranger, not a business associate, not someone from work. It was someone from my past, someone I had thought long gone from my life, someone whose presence carried memories I had buried and tried to forget. The air grew thick, heavy with unspoken truths, and my chest tightened as memories collided with the present moment. My husband's expression remained unreadable, controlled, yet I could sense a subtle tension in his jaw, a flicker in his eyes that betrayed more than he wanted me to see. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, but my voice was trapped behind a wall of shock and fear. The hallway seemed to shrink around us, the faint hum of the elevator now deafening, and as the person stepped closer, the fragments of my own past and the mystery of my husband's secret life collided violently, creating a knot of dread and curiosity in my chest. My mind raced as I tried to comprehend the impossible. How long had this been going on, and what role had my husband played in orchestrating it? The figure before me looked calm, almost casual, yet I could sense the weight of concealed intentions behind their gaze. I took a hesitant step forward, heart pounding, and the hallway seemed to pulse with tension. Each second dragged, stretching reality into a taut thread that threatened to snap. I could feel the edges of panic sharpening at my senses as I noticed subtle gestures between the two of them, exchanges of words and glances that hinted at plans, alliances, or perhaps betrayals I had never imagined. The hotel, once ordinary, now felt like the epicenter of a clandestine world I had only glimpsed in half-truths and suspicions. And then he spoke again, his voice low, deliberate, as if revealing just enough to ignite my curiosity, but withholding the full weight of the secret. The figure finally spoke, their voice smooth yet heavy with meaning, and my stomach twisted as I realized that the secrets I had suspected were far deeper and far darker than any betrayal I had imagined. My husband's composure remained, but I could sense a subtle tension in his shoulders, a silent acknowledgement that the walls of deception were collapsing around us. The hallway, the muted lights, the faint murmur of distant conversations, all seemed irrelevant compared to the revelation about to unfold. I stepped closer, drawn by a mix of fear and desperate to uncover the truth, yet terrified of its consequences. Every heartbeat echoed like a warning, each breath a reminder that I had ventured too far into a world I didn't fully understand. The person in front of me lifted a small envelope from their coat, handing it to my husband with a careful reverence. I realized that what I was about to see would not just expose secrets, it would force me to confront the darkest truths. My eyes stayed glued to my husband as he carefully opened the envelope, each movement deliberate, almost ritualistic, as if he understood the gravity of what lay inside. My fingers dug into the railing behind me, nails pressing into my palms as a cold shiver ran down my spine. The papers inside were folded meticulously, the handwriting instantly familiar, and yet I couldn't place it at first. Each line seemed coded, holding stories, confessions, and hidden truths that had been carefully concealed from me for years. The atmosphere in the hallway thickened, heavy with tension and unspoken danger. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I realized that these weren't just personal secrets. They were pieces of a puzzle that spanned decades, decisions, and manipulations I had unknowingly become entangled in. I took a hesitant step closer, but my husband's gaze flicked in my direction, and a flash of recognition crossed his face. Panic and curiosity collided in my chest. I had been caught as the envelope's contents unfolded. I caught glimpses of photographs, letters, and small mementos, each triggering memories and relationships I trusted suddenly seemed shadowed by secrecy. My chest tightened as I realized the web of deceit and protection my husband had woven was far more intricate than I could have imagined. Every item, every scribbled annotation carried weight, linking me, my family, and even strangers in ways I wasn't ready to comprehend. My hands trembled, caught between wanting to flee and the insatiable need to understand. Then my husband paused, lifting one photograph with care, and for a fraction of a second, his eyes met mine intense, unreadable, carrying the unspoken acknowledgement that my presence had been noticed. I froze, unsure whether to retreat or confront him, but my curiosity had tethered me to the hallway. The envelope had become a Pandora's box, and I was both witness and captive of the truth it promised to reveal. The young woman from earlier shifted nervously in the background, her gaze darting between my husband and me, and the tension in the hallway became nearly unbearable. Each second stretched painfully, the muted hotel lights casting long shadows that seemed to mirror the secrets before us. My husband began to sort the letters and photographs, each movement measured and deliberate, as though he were piecing together a story I was only beginning to understand. The words on the letters whispered fragments of betrayals and sacrifices. And then a single photograph caught my eye, an image so shocking, so intertwined with my own life, that it felt as if the floor beneath me had vanished. The realization hit like ice. The truth I had been chasing for weeks, the reason I had followed him here, was far darker and more personal than any affair. My heart pounded, and a suffocating dread settled over me, because I now understood that the revelation awaiting me would change everything. I could barely breathe as I stared at the photograph, my vision blurred with a mix of disbelief and mounting fear. It was a picture of my husband, but not in the context I had imagined. The setting was strange, almost clandestine, and the faces around him, some familiar, some entirely unknown, hinted at a world I had never suspected. My hands tightened around the railing, knuckles white, as I tried to piece together how this connected to the letters and envelopes. Every detail, the expressions, the folded corners, the careful annotations, spoke of long-kept secrets and hidden alliances, decisions made without my knowledge. My husband, sensing my gaze, turned slowly, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that rooted me in place. I realized that I had crossed an invisible line. He had caught me following him, and there was no turning back. The hotel hallway felt suffocating, every echo of footsteps magnified, every flicker of light casting doubt and fear. The sound of the hotel door clicking shut behind a staff member made me jump, my body stiff with tension, and I realized my presence was no longer hidden. My husband's gaze sharpened, piercing, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something I couldn't name: disappointment, anger, and a quiet calculation all at once. He stepped closer, holding the photograph as if it were a fragile weapon, the weight of the secrets it contained palpable. I wanted to explain, to tell him I was only trying to understand, but my voice was gone, trapped in my throat. The young woman in the background remained frozen, almost like she too feared what would happen next. Every letter, every photograph, every coded note in his hands now seemed to pulse with significance, each one a fragment of a life I had never truly known. And then he spoke, his voice calm but cutting through the tension like steel, asking why I was there. I stood frozen, caught between fear and the compulsion to understand, as my husband's expression softened briefly, then hardened again, a mix of sorrow and inevitability in his eyes. He gestured toward the table with the letters and photographs, signaling me to come closer, and every nerve in my body screamed to run. Yet my curiosity chained me in place. Slowly, I approached, my mind racing through all the possible explanations. Was it an affair, a betrayal, or something far more dangerous? As I neared the table, he placed the photograph down and lifted a folded letter. Opening it with deliberate care, the words inside were addressed to me, written in a hand I thought I had forgotten decades ago, revealing confessions, warnings, and truths I never imagined existed. My chest tightened, tears stinging my eyes, as I realized that the life I had believed I knew, the trust, the marriage, the comfort, was intertwined with secrets far darker and deeper than infidelity. My hands shook as I reached closer to the table, my eyes locked on the envelope he had opened. The words inside seemed to burn into my mind, warnings, coded messages, and confessions that tied him to people and events I had never imagined. The photographs scattered across the table told a story of manipulation and hidden danger, with faces I recognized and others that sent chills down my spine. My husband's eyes never left me, calm yet intense, as if weighing how much I could handle. I wanted to turn and run, to escape the truths unfolding before me, but an invisible thread held me rooted, compelling me to see the full extent of what had been kept from me. Every detail, the creases of letters, the folded corners of photographs, the faint smudges of ink, was deliberate. A carefully maintained map of secrets, and the realization hit: the man I had married was part of a world I could not have imagined, a world I had unknowingly stepped into, and one wrong move now could destroy everything. Low, deliberate voice broke the silence, one I hadn't recognized until it spoke my name. I spun, heart in my throat, and saw another figure in the shadows, a man I had only known in fleeting memories, whose presence now made the hairs on my arms stand on end. My husband's gaze hardened, his calm composure barely masking the tension between them. The letters, the photographs, and the coded notes were pieces of a dangerous puzzle, and I was standing at its center. The young woman beside him hesitated, her lips pressed tightly together, as if waiting for a signal that never came. The hotel room, once ordinary, felt like a trap, each corner filled with silent observers, each glance carrying judgment, fear, or warning. My chest tightened as the truth began to emerge. This wasn't about betrayal or cheating. This was about power, protection, and a hidden reality that I had unwittingly stepped into. And the realization made the ground under my feet feel as fragile as glass. I took a tentative step forward, compelled by a mixture of fear and desperate curiosity. And my husband finally spoke, his voice low, precise, and commanding. He explained in careful terms that the letters and photographs were not evidence of infidelity, but a map of protection, alliances, and dangerous connections he had been forced to maintain for years, all to safeguard our family. My mind reeled, struggling to absorb the layers of deception and purpose intertwined with love and fear. The man in the shadows remained silent, his presence heavy with judgment, and I sensed the weight of history pressing down, decades of decisions made in darkness to prevent harm. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, yet the enormity of the truth left me paralyzed. Every photograph, every gesture of secrecy now revealed a world I had unknowingly inhabited, and in that moment, I realized that my search for betrayal had instead uncovered a reality far dangerous than I could have ever imagined. My legs trembled as I pressed against the wall, heart hammering with every word he spoke. The hotel room, dimly lit and heavy with tension, felt like a stage where secrets performed their dangerous dance. My husband's eyes flicked toward the man in the shadows, an unspoken conversation passing between them that I wasn't meant to hear. I noticed the young woman shift nervously, her fingers brushing against a notebook, as if guarding its contents from both me and the mysterious figure. Each envelope, each photograph, seemed to pulse with hidden meaning, revealing alliances, betrayals, and calculated moves meant to protect lives I had assumed were safe. My pulse raced as I realized the web wasn't just about him. It encompassed friends and enemies in a network so complex that every step I had taken unknowingly placed me at its center. The air felt thicker, and I understood, with a shiver that ran down my spine, that the unthinkable I had been chasing was far more dangerous than any affair. Suddenly, the man in the shadows stepped closer, his presence commanding and terrifying. My husband's gaze followed him, calculating, measured, as if they were engaged in a silent chess game I could barely comprehend. My throat went dry, every instinct screaming for me to run, yet curiosity anchored me to the cold wall. I glimpsed a folded envelope in my husband's hand, smaller than the rest, but somehow more critical, and my fingers itched to reach out, to touch the proof of truths I had long suspected, yet never imagined. The young woman's eyes met mine for a fleeting second, and I saw fear and warning all at once. I realized then that I was not just witnessing hidden truths. I was witnessing decisions that had shaped the lives of everyone I loved, decisions made in shadows to protect, manipulate, or control. And my presence here had shifted the delicate balance. I understood that one wrong step could unravel the carefully constructed facade of safety, exposing everyone to consequences. A sudden noise, a creak of the hotel door, made me freeze, every nerve in my body taut with anticipation. My husband glanced sharply toward the sound, then back at the man in the shadows. The envelopes on the table seemed to radiate significance, each one a story or a fragment of a life orchestrated in secrecy. I inched closer and caught a glimpse of one photograph, a family gathering I had attended years ago, now altered in subtle but unmistakable ways, expressions carefully arranged. And in the center stood my husband, his demeanor impossibly controlled, yet hinting at an unspoken truth that clawed at my mind. The man in the shadows spoke softly, but the weight behind his words pressed on the room like a physical force, and in that instant, the horrifying possibility hit me. What I had feared as infidelity was only the surface of a reality far darker, more calculated, and far more personal than I had ever imagined. And somehow, I was now inextricably entangled. My hands tightened around the edge of the wall as I realized I was too exposed, too visible, and yet too captivated to move. My husband's every gesture inside the room screamed authority, but the tension in his jaw betrayed a shadow I had never seen before. The man in the shadows leaned closer, lowering his voice so only my husband could hear, and I caught a single word that sent chills down my spine: compromise. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots, but every step I had taken, I felt insignificant compared to the magnitude of what I was witnessing. I saw the young woman step forward, her fingers trembling as she handed another envelope to my husband. And for the first time, I felt the weight of my own presence. If he noticed me now, everything would change. The hotel's dim lights cast long, shifting shadows, making the walls seem alive, as if the room itself was watching, waiting for the moment I would be discovered. And I knew, with a growing dread, that moment was coming. Suddenly, the room fell into a silence, so complete it pressed against my chest, and my husband's head turned, scanning the space with an intensity that froze me in place. I had followed him this far, heart hammering with anticipation, only to realize that he had sensed me long before I even stepped into the alley. His gaze locked onto mine through the slightly ajar door, sharp, unwavering, as if he had been expecting me all along. My stomach twisted into knots, and for a terrifying second, I thought he might call out, revealing my presence to everyone. But instead, a subtle question in his eyes, and I understood. He knew I had been following him, and he was weighing whether I was a threat, a curiosity, or something else entirely. The young woman's hands stilled mid-motion, and the man in the shadows stiffened, sensing the shift in energy. My chest burned with anxiety, every instinct screaming to run, but a darker curiosity rooted me to the spot. I had to see what he was hiding before I could decide. My husband stepped toward the door, moving with a quiet authority that made my heart race uncontrollably. The shadows in the hotel hallway seemed to stretch toward me, the corridor narrowing with each of his steps. My mind whirled, imagining every possible explanation for his secretive behavior, but none of them prepared me for what I was about to confront. As he drew closer, I tried to shrink into the darkness, to become invisible. Yet the click of my heel against the worn carpet betrayed me. He stopped abruptly, eyes locking onto mine, and for the first time, the calm authority I had always trusted in him vanished, replaced by a sharp, piercing intensity. "Why are you here?" His voice held a weight that froze me in place, every instinct screaming fear. In that moment, I realized the night was about to unravel everything I thought I knew about him, and the truth waiting behind the hotel doors would change my life forever. My heart pounded so loudly I feared it would give me away as he stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. Every instinct screamed to retreat, yet my feet felt rooted to the floor. The hotel hallway felt impossibly long, the dim lighting creating eerie shadows that seemed to mirror the tension between us. He stopped just a few feet away, the air thick with unspoken questions, and for a moment, we simply stared at each other, me frozen with fear and curiosity, him calculating every movement. Then unexpectedly, he leaned slightly, lowering his voice into a whisper only I could hear. "You shouldn't be here." The words were calm, almost casual, yet carried an authority that made the blood drain from my face. I realized with growing dread that the secret he had been keeping wasn't something trivial. It was far bigger, far darker than I had imagined, and the moment of revelation was approaching faster than I could have prepared for. I swallowed hard, trying to form words to explain myself, but my voice faltered, caught in my throat. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing, as if measuring my intentions, my courage, or perhaps my audacity to follow him. Behind him, the young woman froze mid-step, her face pale, fingers gripping the edge of the envelope she had been carrying. The tension in the room was almost physical, pressing against my chest with a weight I could hardly bear. My mind raced through every scenario. Was he angry, protective, or testing me? And then, as he turned slightly, I caught a glimpse of the room he had entered. Stacks of envelopes, photographs, and documents meticulously arranged, each seemingly more incriminating than the last. My chest tightened, my stomach twisted, and I realized that the secret world he inhabited was not just a betrayal. It was a labyrinth of truths, lies, and hidden lives, and I had walked straight into the center of it, without knowing which side I would fall on. He took a deliberate step closer, his presence dominating the narrow hallway, and my fear surged into a cold, gripping dread. I could see the subtle tension in his hands, the way he flexed his fingers, as if controlling something only he fully understood. The young woman behind him seemed almost paralyzed, her eyes darting nervously between us, and for a heartbeat, the world felt suspended, the night holding its breath. Then he spoke, his words calm but sharp. "I've been waiting for this moment. I hoped you wouldn't come, but here you are." The casual delivery belied the intensity in his eyes, a mixture of regret and an unspoken challenge. My mind spun, struggling to comprehend what he meant, and I realized that following him had brought me to the edge of truths. Every secret, every shadowed detail was about to confront me head-on, and I could feel the life I had known slipping through my fingers, replaced by a chilling awareness that nothing would ever be the same again. His gaze held me captive, sharp and unwavering, and I realized there was no turning back now. Every instinct screamed to flee, but my legs refused to obey, rooted in fear and curiosity. The soft hum of the hotel corridor seemed deafening, the faint flicker of the overhead light casting shadows across his face that made him almost unrecognizable. He reached for a keycard, sliding it into the door with deliberate precision, revealing a room stacked with papers, photographs, and folders that radiated secrecy. The young woman stepped aside, her hands trembling as if fearing the weight of the revelations inside. My pulse raced, every detail clawing at my mind. What had he been hiding? And why had he chosen this hotel, this exact room? My eyes darted to a folder on the far table, partially open, revealing names and dates I recognized. And suddenly, the implications hit me. This wasn't about infidelity at all. It was a hidden life, carefully orchestrated. The room felt suffocating, a cage built of secrets and lies, yet I couldn't tear my eyes away. He turned slightly, scanning the papers with meticulous attention, and I noticed the tension in his jaw, the subtle tightening of his hands. Every gesture spoke of authority, control, and knowledge I had never possessed. The young woman handed him a small envelope, her fingers trembling, and he opened it slowly, as if savoring the weight of its contents. My breath caught when I glimpsed a photograph, a group of men, serious, faces etched with purpose, surrounding him, standing in locations I had never visited but recognized from old family albums. My heart lurched. Who were these people? I pressed myself further into the shadowed corner, every flicker of movement making me shiver. And then, almost imperceptibly, he glanced toward the doorway where I was hiding. He had seen me, and the consequences of being caught in this hidden world were about to unfold in ways I could not yet imagine. He stepped toward the entrance, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that froze me in place. I could feel the weight of decades of secrets pressing down. The room behind him, a vault of lives I hadn't known existed. The young woman seemed paralyzed, and the flicker of lights reflected off envelopes and photographs. He spoke, his voice low but commanding, every word deliberate. "I knew you'd follow, but I didn't expect you to be this close." The calmness of his tone was terrifying, yet it held a strange, intimate familiarity, my mind questioning every choice, every absence over the years. And then I realized the truth. The thing I had feared and imagined for weeks wasn't what it seemed. He wasn't meeting another woman. He was part of a network, a life of secrets, hidden agendas, and dangerous alliances. The air thickened, my pulse pounding, as I stood on the edge of revelations that would redefine everything I thought I knew about him, about marriage, and about trust itself. I stayed hidden behind the lobby pillar, watching my husband speak to the hotel manager in a whisper. His shoulders were tense, his hands stiff, and every gesture looked like he was trying to hide something urgent. My pulse hammered as the manager handed him a small black access card, something clearly more than a simple room key. I knew then that whatever he was involved in wasn't a casual meeting or harmless visit. As he walked toward the elevator, he paused and looked around sharply, as if sensing someone close, and I froze mid-breath. For a split second, I was sure his eyes brushed past my corner, but he turned away again. I slipped out behind him, keeping distance, terrified he would catch me, but even more terrified of what I might find if I stopped following. The elevator doors closed between us, but I caught the glowing number before it disappeared, floor 11. Something about it twisted my stomach. It was the kind of floor used for long-term stays, private suites, or people wanting complete discretion. I forced myself to take the stairs, each step echoing too loudly in the empty emergency stairwell. By the time I reached the 11th floor, my legs shook, but adrenaline pushed me forward. The hallway was silent, dimly lit, with thick carpet that swallowed sound. I crept toward the direction he had gone, scanning room numbers, listening for voices. Halfway down the corridor, I heard a faint click, like a door unlocking, followed by a low murmur that didn't sound like his voice alone. My breath caught as I pressed my ear against the wall, straining to understand who he was secretly meeting. Just as I leaned closer toward the sound, the door swung open without warning, spilling warm light into the hallway. I jerked back, but not fast enough. My husband stood there, staring straight at me, his expression a mix of shock, anger, and something I had never seen before: fear. "What are you doing here?" he whispered, gripping my arm and pulling me inside before anyone else could see. I stumbled into a small suite that smelled faintly of disinfectant and something metallic. Papers were spread across the table, a laptop still warm, and a second pair of shoes sat near the bed, clearly not his. The air felt heavy with secrets. Before I could speak, he pressed a finger to his lips and said in a low, urgent tone, "You shouldn't have come here. You have no idea what this place really is." Before I could demand answers, a shadow moved from the adjoining room. My husband tensed instantly. A woman stepped into view, mid-30s, sharp eyes, dressed in plain black like security personnel. She glanced at me, then at him. "You said she wouldn't follow." Her voice held accusation, not surprise. My husband exhaled, rubbing his forehead as if the situation had just become much worse. "She wasn't supposed to," he muttered. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. The woman tapped a tablet, showing a map full of red blinking markers. "We don't have time." They shifted locations. My husband turned to me, jaw clenched. "You need to listen carefully. What you think you know about me, it's not the whole truth." He guided me toward the table covered in documents. My eyes caught fragments, coded coordinates, surveillance photos, and a symbol I didn't recognize. A black circle with a diagonal slash. "What is all this?" I whispered. He hesitated, then said, "The people I'm tracking. They've been watching us for weeks." My stomach dropped. The woman cut in. "We have less than an hour before they move again." My husband grabbed a folder and pressed it into my hands. Inside was a picture of me, taken from angles that made my skin crawl. "They were planning to reach you first," he said. "That's why I've been here." My breath hitched as the room seemed to shrink around me. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. His answer was barely audible. "Because knowing puts you in more danger." A loud vibration rattled the table, the woman's tablet flashing red. "They're here," she said grimly. My husband immediately snapped into action, pulling me toward the bathroom door, which hid a second exit. "We need to move now." My pulse thundered as distant footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow and deliberate. Whoever they weren't rushing. They were confident. Hunting. The lights flickered once, plunging the suite into a tense half-darkness. The woman drew a small device from her pocket, something between a key fob and a detonator. "If they breach, I stall. You two get out." My husband grabbed her wrist. "No, we stay together." A sharp knock hit the door, 3 steady taps that made my blood run cold. Whoever stood outside already knew exactly who was inside. The knocking stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. My husband pressed a finger to his lips and slowly guided me backward toward the hidden exit. The woman positioned herself near the door, device in hand, breathing steady, but eyes sharp like steel. Another sound slithered through the air, a metallic scrape, as if someone dragged something along the hallway floor. My heart hammered so loudly I feared they'd hear it. My husband whispered, "They're testing the lock." A faint click confirmed it. His grip tightened on my arm. "Once we're out, stay low and don't look back." A cold dread crawled up my spine. I didn't even know who they were, but their presence felt suffocating, like danger had a heartbeat. Just as my husband pushed open the secret door, a muffled voice outside the suite said, "Room service." Polite. Calm. Too calm. The woman shot him a look. They both knew it was a lie. Suddenly, the main door handle jerked violently. The woman raised the device, and a soft hum filled the room. My husband urged me through the narrow passage first. The air inside was stale, smelling of dust and old wiring. As the panel slid shut behind us, a thundering crash erupted. The intruders had forced their way in. I jolted, stumbling forward. From the other side of the wall came the woman's voice, fierce and commanding, followed by a heavy thud. My husband pulled me deeper into the darkness. "We've lost the suite. Keep moving," he said. The passage emptied into a dim maintenance corridor behind the hotel kitchens. A low, vibrating alarm echoed subtle, not the hotel's, but some signal the intruders had triggered. My husband checked behind us, jaw tight. "They'll track movement. We need to blend with the crowd." He handed me a staff apron hanging from a hook. My hands shook as I tied it around my waist. The corridor buzzed with the clatter of dishes and distant chatter, but the tension felt coiled, waiting to snap. As we stepped into the brightly lit kitchen, no one noticed us, thank God. But then, through the glass of the swinging door, I saw 2 men in dark jackets enter the hallway, scanning the area with predatory precision. "Don't slow down," my husband whispered. "They're sweeping." We slipped into the flow of kitchen staff, carrying trays and steaming pots. But every sound behind me felt like a footstep aimed at my back. My husband guided me toward the service elevator, keeping his head down. Just as the doors opened, a cook shouted, "Hey, you two hold on." My heart froze. We turned slowly, but the man only pointed at the apron I'd tied on wrong. He laughed and walked off. Relief washed over me, but only for a beat, because the reflection in the gleaming metal counter showed two figures entering the kitchen, scanning each face. My husband pressed the elevator button repeatedly. "Come on," he muttered. The doors finally closed, just as one of the men's eyes landed on us. Inside the elevator, my husband slumped briefly, rubbing his temples. "We're going to the loading dock," he said. "A driver I trust should be waiting." His voice was steady, but worry leaked through the cracks as the elevator descended. A faint beeping started. It wasn't from the elevator, it was from his pocket. He pulled out a small badge-like device flashing red. "They're pinging the hotel's internal system," he whispered. "They'll know this elevator is moving without authorization." The elevator jolted, slowing before its intended floor. My stomach dropped. My husband grabbed my hand. "The moment these doors open, run. Don't stop unless I say." I couldn't help but think, what kind of life had he been living without me? The doors opened to a half-lit service hallway, not the loading dock. At first, it seemed empty, but then a voice cut through the silence. "You should have stayed out of this." A man stepped out from behind a pillar, dressed like the other's dark jacket, emotionless eyes. My husband pushed me behind him. "She knows nothing," he warned. The man smiled faintly. "That's about to change." He reached inside his coat. Before I could scream, my husband lunged, slamming the emergency stop on the elevator door, forcing it to begin closing. The man's hand came out with something metallic. My husband shoved me fully inside. "Go," he yelled as the door shut between us. The last thing I saw was him turning to face the man alone. The elevator dropped so fast my knees buckled, but my mind was glued upstairs, my husband alone with that man. When the doors opened on the lobby level, the hotel buzzed with normal guests, completely unaware of the chaos happening in its hidden floors. I stumbled out, fighting panic. Should I go back up? Call someone? Run? Before I could decide, a security guard approached, speaking into his radio while looking directly at me. I froze, terrified he was part of the men chasing us. "Ma'am," he said, "are you with the gentleman who just came through here?" My heart stopped. "Which gentleman?" I asked carefully. He pointed toward the side exit, tall, limping a little, limping. That had to be my husband. He must have gotten away. I rushed toward the exit, pulse hammering. Outside, cool air slapped my face, but the parking lot felt too quiet, too exposed. I spotted a dark sedan idling near the curb, its headlights off. As I approached, the back window rolled down just a few inches. "Get in," a voice said, my husband. I opened the door and climbed in, breathless. He looked shaken, a small cut on his cheek, but alive. "We don't have long," he muttered, checking the mirrors. "They're regrouping." I wanted to ask what happened upstairs, but the car jerked forward before I got the words out. "Where are we going?" I asked. He hesitated, gripping the wheel. "Somewhere I should have taken you years ago, somewhere that will explain everything." His tone was heavy, like the next destination would change everything I thought I knew. We drove in tense silence as the city lights blurred past. My husband kept glancing at the rearview mirror, as if expecting a convoy behind us. After several turns into an industrial district, he pulled into a storage facility with high metal fences. "This is where it began," he said quietly. He led me to a unit at the very back, unlocked it, and slid the door up. Inside were stacks of boxes, files, and equipment I didn't recognize, but what caught my eye was a wall covered in photos, dozens of them, of people I didn't know, and some I did. Neighbors, friends, even my sister. "Why are they all here?" I whispered, horrified. My husband closed the door behind us. "Because they're connected, and you need to know how." I backed away from the wall as the photos seemed to close in on me. My husband walked toward a table stacked with sealed envelopes. "This started before you and I ever met," he said, picking one up. "I was recruited when I was 23. Surveillance, tracking, intelligence, unofficial work." His voice was hollow, as if each word hurt. "These people," I whispered, pointing at the photos. "Why them? Why us?" He hesitated, eyes shadowed. "Because someone in that group has been working with the men you saw at the hotel. Someone close. Someone who used me and might be using you." My stomach dropped. "Who?" I asked. He looked at me with a trembling breath. "I don't know yet, but they've already made their move." He opened one of the boxes and pulled out a notebook filled with timelines and coded entries. "Last week," he said, flipping pages, "one of my old contacts warned me a breach was coming. Someone leaked my location and your schedule." A cold shiver raced through me. My schedule. Why would they want me? He met my eyes. "Because you're leverage. They know you're the only reason I'd stay silent." My knees weakened. Silent about what? He closed the notebook slowly, almost painfully. "About what I found before I quit. About the truth behind the organization I used to work for. They're not who they pretended to be, and the men at the hotel, they're not after me. They're after the evidence." He tapped a locked briefcase in the corner. "It's in there." I stared at the briefcase, its cold metal gleaming under the dim lights. "What's inside that can put us in this much danger?" I whispered. My husband knelt beside it. "Proof that the organization has been involved in disappearances. People who asked the wrong questions." My blood ran cold. "Then why take it?" "Because," he said, voice steadying, "they framed me for something I didn't do, and I needed leverage to survive." He ran his fingers along the case. "But I never thought they'd come this close to you." A sudden loud clang echoed outside the storage unit, making us both jump. My husband grabbed my arm and pulled me behind a stack of boxes. "They found us," he breathed, and for the first time, I saw true fear in his eyes. My husband pressed a finger to his lips, signaling me to stay silent as footsteps scraped against the concrete outside. The air felt thick, vibrating with danger. Someone rattled the metal door, testing it. My pulse hammered so loudly I feared they could hear it. My husband reached for a small flashlight and clicked it twice, some kind of signal. "If they breach the door," he whispered, "stay behind me. No matter what happens, don't run." His voice was steady, but I felt the slight tremor in his hand. The footsteps stopped. A long, suffocating silence followed. Then a slow knock, 3 taps, each colder than the last. My husband's face drained of color. "That's their code," he murmured. "They want the briefcase." He pulled me closer, shielding me. "But they're not getting you." The door creaked open a few inches. Someone had unlocked it from the outside. My breath caught. A tall figure stepped in, silhouetted by the hallway light. My husband grabbed a metal rod from the shelf and raised it. "Stay where you are," he warned. The shadow lifted both hands slowly. "Easy," a low voice said. "I'm not here to hurt you. "I'm here to warn you." My husband hesitated, but didn't lower the rod. The man stepped forward just enough for the light to reveal him weathered face, tired eyes, a deep scar across his jaw. "They're coming tonight," he said. "Not just a few, all of them." I felt my knees weaken. "Who are you?" He glanced at me briefly. "Someone who used to work with your husband before things went dark." The scarred man shut the door quietly behind him. "You have less than an hour," he said. "They know you took the evidence, and they know she followed you to that hotel. They think she saw more than she did." My husband's jaw tightened. "Why help us?" The man looked down, almost ashamed. "Because I didn't help the others, and I've lived with that." He stepped closer to the briefcase. "You need to leave this city tonight. If they catch you, they won't negotiate." My husband exchanged a glance with me, a mixture of fear, guilt, and something like resignation. "What about the truth?" I asked. "What about clearing his name?" The man shook his head. "Truth won't matter if you're dead." A distant engine roared outside, echoing through the metal walls. He froze. "They're earlier than I thought." The scarred man rushed to the window and peeked through the edge of the curtain. "Black SUV. That's them," he whispered. My stomach twisted as shadows moved across the gravel outside. My husband grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the back exit. "There's a service tunnel," he said. "It leads out to the old railway yard." The scarred man blocked us for a moment. "If you go that way, you won't get another chance to come back." My husband met his eyes. "We don't need another chance." A crash echoed from the front door, metal buckling under force. The man nodded, stepping aside. "Go, I'll stall them." My chest tightened. "You'll die." He gave a faint smile. "I've owed that debt for a long time." As we slipped into the darkness of the tunnel, gunshots erupted behind us. The service tunnel smelled of rust and damp earth, but it was the only path to survival. My husband kept glancing back, listening for footsteps, but all we heard were distant echoes, shouts, crashes, the sharp ring of metal. "He's buying us time," my husband muttered, voice heavy with guilt. "He shouldn't have had to." My legs trembled as we reached the ladder leading to the old railway yard. Before climbing, he stopped and cupped my face gently. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for the secrets, for putting you in this danger. I only wanted to protect you." My throat tightened. "Then let me protect you now. We finish this together." A beam of light swept across the tunnel entrance. Someone was searching for us. We scrambled up the ladder as fast as we could, emerging into the cold night air just as a voice yelled, "They're here." We sprinted across the empty railway yard, the crunch of gravel loud beneath our feet. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop, not until headlights suddenly flashed in front of us. A second SUV. Doors opened. I braced for gunfire, but a familiar voice called out, "Get in." It was the scarred man, bloodied, limping, but alive. "I told you I'd stall them, not die," he grunted. As soon as we climbed in, he sped off, leaving the pursuers trapped behind a derailed freight car he must have pushed onto the tracks. Relief washed over me, heavy and overwhelming. My husband squeezed my hand. "It's over," he murmured. I wasn't sure if it really was, but we had survived the night. And for now, that was enough. Thank you, dear viewer, for staying with me through this journey. If you felt every twist with me, please subscribe to BTS of Life. Until next time, stay safe and trust your instincts.